The needle gleamed under the fluorescent lights as Dr. Sarah Peters steadied her hand. 7 years as a shelter veterinarian hadn't made this part any easier. The German shepherd watched her with intelligent amber eyes that betrayed no fear, only a quiet dignity that made her stomach twist. "I'm sorry, boy," she whispered, her southern drawl thickening with emotion. The dog they called Max had been deemed a danger to the community. The paperwork was clear unprovoked attack on 8-year-old Lily Matthews at the Oak Ridge construction site. The child's jacket still bore the teeth marks. Dr. Peters positioned the needle against his shaved foreleg, her hand trembling slightly. The ancient wall phone rang, its shrill tone slicing through the silence. "Not now," she muttered, but something instinct perhaps made her pause. The phone rang again, more insistent this time. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching. From now, let's continue with the story. Oak Ridge, Alabama was the kind of small town where everyone knew your business before you did. Population 732 and shrinking. It clung to existence like a stubborn weed in the cracked parking lot of the old Piggly Wiggly. The skyline, such as it was, had recently been interrupted by the skeletal framework of the future Oak Ridge Plaza Mall, a desperate attempt by the town council to breathe life into the struggling local economy. Near this construction site stood Jefferson Park, once the pride of the community, now half demolished to make way for additional parking. Its remaining swing sets and rusted merry-go-round served as silent monuments to simpler times, waiting for the inevitable bulldozers to claim them too. Max hadn't always been a stray. The scars hidden beneath his thick German shepherd coat told a story of service and sacrifice. 2 tours in Afghanistan as a military dog had left him with a limp in his right hind leg and what the Army veterinarian had called canine post-traumatic stress. When loud noises made him flinch and cower, he became unadoptable. But Max had escaped the base, somehow making his way to Oak Ridge, where he'd carved out a solitary existence in the shadows of the construction site. 8-year-old Lily Matthews lived with her mother in a small blue house 3 blocks from the park, born with mild autism. Lily experienced the world differently than most children. Words came to her with difficulty, but colors and shapes spoke clearly. Her drawings, pinned proudly to the refrigerator door, revealed a mind that noticed patterns others missed. Her mother, Diane, worked double shifts at the hospital as a nurse's aide, fighting exhaustion and her ex-husband Robert's persistent attempts to prove her an unfit mother. Frank Thompson had seen too much in his 68 years to be easily impressed. Vietnam had taught him about courage. 40 years in construction had taught him about cutting corners, and life had taught him about loyalty. Every morning at precisely 6:17 a.m., he'd leave half his lunch near the site's south entrance for Max, pretending not to notice when the dog appeared from nowhere to claim it. Doctor. Sarah Peters had been Oak Ridge's only veterinarian since her husband died 5 years ago. The framed photo of her son, killed at 19 in a construction accident, faced away from patients on her desk, but remained always in her line of sight. Dawn broke over Oak Ridge with the languid pace of honey pouring from a jar. Max emerged from his makeshift den beneath a stack of discarded pallets at the edge of the construction site, stretching his powerful limbs in the early morning light. The familiar ache in his right hind leg, a souvenir from an IED that had killed his handler overseas, was particularly bothersome this morning. The air smelled of rain and rust. Max had established a careful routine in the 10 months since he'd made Oak Ridge his home. First, a perimeter check around the boundaries of his territory. Then, a drink from the puddle that formed near the site's drainage pipe. Finally, a casual patrol passed the south entrance just as the workers arrived. He wasn't waiting for Frank Thompson's half sandwich. At least, that's what he told himself. Frank's pickup truck rumbled into the gravel parking area at 6:12 a.m., 5 minutes early. As usual. The old man moved with the deliberate care of someone whose joints announced every weather change, his weathered hands. Spotted with age and marked by decades of manual labor, unwrapped a turkey sandwich from wax paper. With practiced nonchalance, he placed half on a clean handkerchief behind a stack of cement bags. "Don't you go telling nobody I'm turning soft in my old age." Frank muttered to the seemingly empty construction yard. "Just can't stand to see nothing go hungry is all." As Frank disappeared into the site trailer, Max emerged from behind a bulldozer, his amber eyes scanning for other humans before approaching the offering. The food was secondary to the ritual, a reminder of a time when humans had been his pack, not his adversaries. 3 blocks away. Lily Matthews sat at her kitchen table, meticulously separating the marshmallows from her cereal. Her mother, Diane, moved around the small kitchen in a familiar dance of efficiency. Lunch being packed, coffee being poured, bills being sorted. "You'll be good for Mrs. Wilson after school today, right, Pumpkin?" Diane asked, checking her watch. The morning shift started at 7:30, and her supervisor had already given her 2 warnings about tardiness. Lily nodded without looking up, her fingers deftly arranging the colorful marshmallows in a precise pattern. "Remember, she's picking you up today because Mommy has the late meeting with Mr. Peterson." Diane didn't mention that Mr. Peterson was actually her lawyer, or that the meeting was about Robert's latest attempt to modify the custody arrangement. Some burdens weren't meant for 8-year-old shoulders, even ones as perceptive as Lily's. By mid-afternoon, the construction site hummed with activity. Concrete mixers growled, hammers pounded, and men shouted over the din. Max kept his distance, retreating to the cooler shadows near the remnants of Jefferson Park where the noise was more bearable. It was Wednesday, which meant half-day at Oak Ridge Elementary. By 1:30 p.m., the park had filled with children released early from the confines of classrooms. Their shrieks and laughter carried to Max's sensitive ears, triggering memories of another life of children on a military base who had scratched behind his ears and called him hero. Lily arrived with 3 other girls, though "with" was perhaps too strong a word. They moved in her orbit, but not quite in her world. Mrs. Wilson, their designated supervisor, settled on a bench with her romance novel, occasionally glancing up to count heads. "Let's play hide-and-seek," announced Brittany, the self-appointed leader of the group. "Lily, you're it." Lily didn't protest. Being it meant she didn't have to make decisions about where to hide or worry about being found too quickly. She obediently covered her eyes and began counting aloud, her voice soft but determined. 1, 2, 3. Max observed from his hidden vantage point as the children scattered. 2 headed for the old oak tree. 1 ducked behind the rusted merry-go-round, and Lily continued counting, her back to the construction site. 17, 18, 19. A subtle vibration traveled through the ground beneath Max's paws. His military training, thousands of hours of sensing danger before human instruments could detect it, triggered an instant alertness. His eyes scanned the construction site, focusing on the massive crane that loomed above. 23, 24. Max's ears pricked forward. The groaning sound was almost imperceptible to human ears, but to him it screamed danger. The crane's support structure was shifting. 28, 29. His gaze darted back to the children. The girls hiding were safe, but Lily had finished counting. She turned, eyes scanning the playground, then began walking toward the fence separating the park from the construction site. A bright pink ribbon, likely dropped by one of the other girls, had caught her attention. It fluttered against the chain link, just inside the construction zone. "Ready or not?" she called softly, moving toward the fence. The groaning intensified. Max's muscles tensed as memory overlapped with present danger. He'd heard this sound before, in Kandahar, moments before a building collapsed. His handler had called it a sixth sense for trouble. Lily slipped through a gap in the fence, her small frame easily fitting through the opening. She reached for the pink ribbon, oblivious to the metal behemoth beginning to tilt above her. Max acted on instinct honed by years of training. He bolted from his hiding place, a blur of black and tan fur. The construction workers were on break. Mrs. Wilson was engrossed in her book. No one saw the first supporting cable snap. No one except Max. He raced toward Lily, barking fiercely. The girl froze, her eyes widening with fear at the sight of the large dog charging toward her. Max didn't slow. He couldn't. The second cable groaned. When he reached her, Max didn't bite, he bulldozed, his shoulder ramming into her small body, knocking her backward through the fence opening. His teeth caught the edge of her jacket, dragging her further from danger. Lily screamed, the sound piercing and terrified. She scrambled to her feet and ran, tears streaming down her face, jacket torn. The final cable snapped with a sound like a gunshot. Max barely cleared the danger zone as the crane toppled, crashing into the exact spot where Lily had stood moments before. The ground shook with the impact, dust and debris billowing upward in a choking cloud. From his position at the edge of the park, Max watched Lily run toward Mrs. Wilson and the other children. They huddled around her, their backs to the construction site, unaware of the disaster that had nearly claimed her. No one saw the crane fall. No one connected Lily's tears to anything but the frightening dog. No one knew what Max had done, except Frank Thompson, who stood frozen at the site trailer door, coffee cup slipping from his fingers to shatter on the concrete steps. Diane Matthews was elbow-deep in paperwork at the hospital nurses' station when her phone vibrated against the counter. Mrs. Wilson's name flashed on the screen, sending a jolt of alarm through her tired body. Supervisors didn't call mid-afternoon unless something was wrong. "Hello, Mrs. Wilson." Diane pressed the phone tightly against her ear, stepping away from the bustle of the hospital corridor. "Ms. Matthews, there's been an incident with Lily." The elderly woman's voice quavered. "She's all right, physically, but quite shaken up. A stray dog attacked her at the park." The words "attacked" and "Lily" collided in Diane's mind like two freight trains. "I'm coming right now. Is she hurt? Did it bite her?" "No visible bites, but her jacket is torn. She's very upset. Hasn't spoken since it happened." 20 minutes later, Diane burst through the doors of Jefferson Park's community center, where Mrs. Wilson had taken the children after the incident. Lily sat alone at a plastic table, her small fingers methodically shredding a paper cup. Her face was blotchy from crying, her eyes vacant in that particular way that Diane recognized as Lily retreating deep inside herself. "Baby," Are you okay?" Diane knelt beside her daughter, hands hovering uncertainly, afraid to trigger further distress. Lily didn't respond or look up. Mrs. Wilson approached, clutching Lily's purple backpack and torn jacket. It was a big German shepherd came out of nowhere. Never seen it before myself. But some of the construction workers said it's been hanging around the site. Diane examined the jacket, her stomach clenching at the jagged tear along the shoulder seam. Distinct teeth marks punctured the fabric. Did anyone call animal control? They're already looking for it. Said they've had complaints about strays near the construction site before. Diane gathered Lily into her arms, feeling the girl's slight frame trembling against her chest. "I'm taking her home. Thank you for calling me." As they walked to the car, Diane's phone rang again. This time, it was Robert, her ex-husband and Lily's father. The timing was so suspiciously perfect that Diane wondered if he had some sort of parental radar for moments of crisis. "Not now," she muttered, silencing the phone. "At home." Lily remained silent, curled on the couch with her favorite blanket, while Diane made necessary calls first to her supervisor to explain her sudden departure, then to Lily's therapist, and finally to animal control to file a formal report. "Yes, a German shepherd, near the Jefferson Park construction site," she confirmed, watching Lily from the kitchen doorway. "My daughter's jacket is torn, but thankfully she wasn't bitten." The animal control officer's voice was professionally sympathetic. "We'll continue searching, ma'am. If we find it, the dog will be quarantined and evaluated, given the attack on a child if it's deemed dangerous." He let the sentence hang. Diane knew what went unsaid. Dangerous dogs weren't given second chances, especially not strays with no owner to advocate for them. Under different circumstances, this might have troubled her. She'd always considered herself an animal lover. But right now, her maternal instincts overwhelmed all other considerations. "Do whatever is necessary to keep my daughter safe," she said firmly. That evening, as Diane tucked Lily into bed, her phone lit up with a text from Robert. "Heard about incident with dog. This wouldn't have happened in my neighborhood. Documenting for upcoming hearing." The message sent a wave of cold fear through Diane's chest. Robert had been building a case for months, painting her as an overworked, negligent mother. This incident would be ammunition for his attorney. "Mommy," Lily's small voice broke through Diane's spiraling thoughts. "Yes, baby, bad dog." Two simple words, the first she'd spoken since the incident, yet they carried such weight. Diane smoothed Lily's hair. "Yes, sweetheart, bad dog, but it won't hurt you again. I promise." Across town, as darkness settled over Oak Ridge, Animal Control Officer Pete Simmons made his final sweep of the construction site. His flashlight beam cut through the shadows, reflecting in a pair of amber eyes near the fallen crane. "Got you," he muttered, reaching for his tranquilizer gun. Max could have run. Every instinct urged him to flee, to disappear into the familiar darkness. But exhaustion from the day's events and the persistent ache in his leg slowed his reaction. The dart caught him in the shoulder, its contents flowing into his bloodstream with paralyzing efficiency. As consciousness faded, Max's last thought was of the small human he'd saved her scent of strawberry shampoo and fear The next morning, Frank Thompson arrived at the construction site earlier than usual, an extra sandwich wrapped in his lunch pail. The chaos of yesterday's crane collapse had shut down operations pending a safety inspection, but he'd come anyway, concerned about the dog he'd secretly befriended. "Max," he called softly, setting the food in their usual meeting spot. "Come on, boy." Only silence answered. Frank's attention shifted to the collapsed crane. Yellow caution tape surrounded it, fluttering in the morning breeze. He approached slowly, his experienced eyes assessing the damage with professional detachment that gradually gave way to confusion. "Don't make a lick of sense," he muttered, examining the snapped cables. Equipment failures happened, but 3 cables simultaneously. He'd been in construction long enough to recognize when something wasn't right. His phone rang, the site foreman calling an emergency meeting for all workers. Frank took one last look around for Max before heading to his truck, a nagging worry settling in his chest. At the Oak Ridge Animal Shelter, Dr. Sarah Peters reviewed the intake forms for the German Shepherd brought in the previous night. Aggression toward child. No collar or microchip. Estimated age 6 to 7 years. She approached the quarantine kennel where Max lay on a thin blanket, still groggy from the tranquilizer. Unlike most strays brought to the shelter, he didn't bark or pace. He watched her with alert, intelligent eyes that seemed to evaluate her just as carefully as she was evaluating him. "You're a handsome fellow," she said, kneeling to observe him through the chain-link door. "What's your story, I wonder?" The shelter assistant, Tanya, appeared with a clipboard. "Animal control just called. The mother of the girl wants to press charges. Apparently, her ex-husband is using the incident in their custody battle." Dr. Peters sighed. She'd seen this scenario play out before, dogs caught in the crossfire of human conflicts. "We'll do the standard evaluation, but given the circumstances—" "Euthanasia?" Tanya asked quietly. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Evaluation first. Then we'll see." But both women knew the likely outcome. A stray dog with no advocate. Involved in an incident with a child, the path forward was grimly predictable. Meanwhile, at Oak Ridge Elementary, Lily sat in her classroom, mechanically coloring a worksheet, while her mind replayed yesterday's events in fragmented images, the pink ribbon fluttering against the fence, the loud barking, being knocked backward, the tremendous crash that followed as she ran away. Her teacher, Ms. Bryant, noticed Lily's unusual quietness. "That's a very interesting drawing, Lily," she commented, looking at the child's paper. Instead of coloring the assigned worksheet, Lily had turned it over and drawn a large dog, a girl, and what appeared to be a tall, falling object in the background. The images were crude but conveyed an intensity that gave Miss Bryant pause. "Can you tell me about your picture?" she asked gently. Lily kept coloring, pressing the crayon so hard it snapped in her small hand. At the Matthews home, Diane was on the phone with her lawyer. Voice lowered, though no one was there to overhear. "Yes. I've filed the report with animal control. No, she wasn't bitten, but her jacket was torn. Of course, I'm documenting everything." She paused, listening. "How bad is it Robert's already using this against me?" The lawyer's response made her sink into a kitchen chair. A separate filing for emergency custody modification. On what grounds? Another pause. Failure to provide adequate supervision. That's ridiculous. Mrs. Wilson was watching all the children. After ending the call, Diane noticed Lily's torn jacket hanging over a chair. She picked it up, examining the damage more carefully in the morning light. The teeth marks formed an unusual pattern, not a vicious tearing, but more like the dog had grabbed the fabric to pull. The thought was quickly dismissed as her phone rang again. This time it was animal control, informing her that the dog had been captured and was undergoing evaluation. They needed her to come in and file additional paperwork. The evaluation is a formality in cases like this, Officer Simmons explained. Given the nature of the incident, I should prepare you for the likelihood that the animal will be euthanized. Diane felt a twinge of discomfort at the matter-of-fact way he discussed ending the dog's life, but she pushed it aside. When would that happen? We're required to hold the animal for 72 hours. After that, assuming no owner comes forward, probably Friday morning. Friday, the same day as her court appearance regarding Robert's emergency custody motion. The symmetry felt ominous somehow. I'll be there this afternoon to sign whatever you need, she said, ending the call. At the construction site. The emergency meeting had dissolved into chaos. The site manager announced that preliminary investigation suggested equipment failure, but Frank Thompson wasn't buying it. Those cables were inspected last month, he argued, his voice carrying over the murmurs of the other workers. All three failing at once. That ain't equipment failure, that's negligence. The project manager, a young man in a too-clean hard hat, frowned. Mr. Thompson, we appreciate your concerns, but let's leave the investigation to the experts. I've been building things since before you were born, son, Frank replied, unintimidated. I know the difference between bad luck and corner cutting. As the meeting disbanded, Frank found himself increasingly troubled by the memory of Max charging toward the little girl just before the crane collapsed. It hadn't looked like an attack from his vantage point. It had looked like, "Sweet Jesus," he muttered as realization dawned. That dog wasn't attacking her. He was saving her. The Matthews kitchen table had become command central for Diane's custody battle. Legal papers formed untidy stacks. Coffee rings marked forgotten mugs, and a calendar bore red circles around Friday's court date. Diane rubbed her temples, fighting a headache as she reviewed the documents she'd signed at Animal Control that afternoon. The bureaucratic language transformed a terrified child and a dangerous dog into clinical terms, juvenile victim, and aggressive canine subject. She'd expected to feel relief knowing the German Shepherd would no longer threaten any children. Instead, a peculiar heaviness had settled in her chest. The shelter veterinarian, Dr. Peters, a slender woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, had explained the euthanasia procedure with gentle frankness. It's painless, she'd assured Diane. Like falling asleep. The sound of breaking glass yanked Diane from her thoughts. She rushed to Lily's room to find her daughter standing amid the shards of a picture frame, the one containing a family photo from happier times, when Robert still lived with them. Lily, don't move. Honey, there's glass everywhere. Diane carefully lifted her daughter away from the danger, noting the girl's vacant expression. What happened, sweetheart? Lily didn't answer. Instead, she wriggled from her mother's grasp and retrieved a drawing from beneath her pillow, thrusting it toward Diane with unusual urgency. The crayon illustration showed three figures, a girl with yellow hair, a large brown dog, and a towering rectangular object that appeared to be falling. Crude arrows indicated movement, the dog pushing the girl, the rectangle toppling. Is this about yesterday? About the dog? Diane asked. Lily nodded vigorously, then pointed at the falling rectangle and made a loud crashing sound that startled her mother. Yes, I know the dog scared you, baby. Diane smoothed Lily's hair. But it can't hurt you any more. Frustration flashed across Lily's face. She shook her head and pointed again at her drawing, more insistently this time. I don't understand. Lily, use your words. Remember, like Dr. Hannigan taught you. But Lily had retreated into silence again, turning away to begin a new drawing with furious concentration. Diane sighed and began cleaning up the broken glass, adding this incident to her mental list of worries. Lily's therapist had warned that trauma could exacerbate her communication difficulties. Just one more thing for Robert's attorney to use against her. At the animal shelter, Dr. Sarah Peters stayed late, reviewing Max's behavioral assessment. The standardized tests had yielded confusing results. The German Shepherd showed no food aggression, no territorial behavior, and actually scored remarkably high on human socialization, completely inconsistent with a dog that would attack unprovoked. It doesn't add up, she murmured. Studying the photo of Max that Tanya had taken for their records, something about the dog's posture, the intelligent alertness in his eyes, nagged at her professional instincts, on impulse. She took her coffee and went to sit outside Max's kennel. The dog immediately approached the chain link, not barking or growling, but watching her with that same unsettling intelligence. "What's your story, boy?" she asked, noticing the way he held his right hind leg slightly elevated, an old injury, clearly long-healed but still causing discomfort. Sarah's phone buzzed with a reminder, Alec's birthday. Her son would have been 24 today. The familiar grief washed over her, different now after 5 years less raw, but somehow wider, like a river that had carved a permanent canyon through her life. He loved dogs, she told Max, surprised at herself for speaking aloud. Especially the working breeds, said they had purpose in their eyes. Max tilted his head slightly, ears forward. "You've got that same look," she continued, "like you're meant for something." Max's sudden bark startled her, coffee sloshing over the rim of her mug. It wasn't aggressive, more like an affirmation. For a moment, Sarah felt an uncanny connection with the condemned animal, as though he understood every word. She shook her head, dismissing the fanciful thought. Too many late nights. Sarah. She chided herself, rising to leave. "You're getting sentimental over a dangerous dog." Yet as she walked away, doubt followed her like a shadow. Frank Thompson hadn't slept. After the realization that Max had been trying to save the Matthews girl, he'd spent hours making calls to animal control, to the construction company's safety officer, to the town newspaper. No one seemed interested in the theory of an elderly construction worker that a stray dog had somehow predicted the crane collapse. "Ain't nobody going to believe me without proof," he muttered, pacing his small kitchen as dawn light filtered through the windows. His arthritic knee protested, but the discomfort was nothing compared to the urgency driving him. The dog had only 3 days before euthanasia. The clock was ticking. Frank had seen enough in Vietnam to know what happened when the innocent got caught in crossfire. He'd been a young man then, powerless to change the larger forces at work. But he wasn't powerless now. Damn it. Not yet. He made one more call to his nephew, who worked for the county, and finally got the information he needed. The construction site had security cameras. If one had captured the incident, it might show what Frank had seen Max saving the girl, not attacking her. By mid-morning, Frank was back at the construction site, his presence raising eyebrows among the investigators and company representatives who had gathered to assess the crane collapse. "Mr. Thompson, this area is currently restricted," the safety inspector informed him, clipboard in hand. "Just need a word with Billy," Frank replied, nodding toward the security guard station. "Personal matter." The lie got him past the tape. Billy Watson had worked security at the site for 3 months, a young man with more interest in his smartphone than actual vigilance, but decent enough. "Need to see yesterday's security footage." "Billy," Frank said without preamble. Billy looked up from his phone, surprised. "I can't do that." "Mr. Thompson, company policy. It's about that dog they took, the German Shepherd. I think he saved that little girl's life before the crane fell." Billy's expression shifted from surprise to intrigue. "The one animal control picked up, they're saying he attacked some kid. They got it wrong. That dog knew something was about to happen. I need proof." The young guard hesitated. "I could lose my job, Mr. Tick." Frank leaned closer. "And that dog's gonna lose his life Friday morning." Something in Frank's intensity must have registered because Billy sighed and glanced at the small bank of monitors. "Look, the cameras restart every 24 hours. Yesterday's footage is already gone from my system, but it gets backed up to the main office downtown." Frank's hope deflated. "Lot of good that does us." "My cousin Darlene works in their IT department," Billy continued, lowering his voice. "I could ask her to take a look, but I can't promise anything." It wasn't much, but it was something. Frank scribbled his phone number on a scrap of paper. "Tell her it's life or death." Because it is. At Oak Ridge Elementary. Lily sat alone during recess, methodically lining up pebbles along the edge of the playground. The other children gave her a wider berth than usual. Her silence today was different. Heavier somehow. Ms. Bryant watched from the doorway, concerned. In 3 years of teaching special needs children, she'd developed an intuition about when a child was processing trauma versus when they were trying to communicate something important but lacked the tools. Lily's drawings, she'd made 6 more since morning, suggested the latter. When the recess bell rang, Ms. Bryant approached Lily gently. "Would you like to show me more of your pictures?" "Lily, I think they're trying to tell an important story." For the first time that day, Lily made eye contact. She nodded and took the teacher's offered hand. In the classroom, Lily spread her drawings across a table. Each depicted variations of the same scene: the girl, the dog, the falling object. In some, she'd added more details: a fence, other children in the distance, what looked like a construction site. "This is you, Ms.?" Bryant asked, pointing to the girl figure. Lily nodded. "And this is the dog that scared you?" Lily shook her head vigorously, then pointed to the falling rectangle and back to the dog, making a pushing motion with her hands. A moment of clarity struck Mr. Bryant. "Lily, is the dog pushing you away from the falling thing?" Lily's face lit up. She nodded emphatically, then mimicked being knocked over. "The dog wasn't trying to hurt you. He was pushing you away from danger." Another vigorous nod. Ms. Bryant felt a chill. If Lily's drawings were accurate, Then a grave misunderstanding was unfolding, one with fatal consequences for the animal that had potentially saved a child's life. "We need to tell your mom about this. Lily. This is very important." Back at the animal shelter, Tanya approached Dr. Peters with a worried expression. "We just got the final approval for Friday's euthanasia. 9 a.m. Sarah glanced toward Max's kennel, where the German Shepherd lay watching the shelter activities with alert interest. "Has anyone come forward as his owner?" "No, and no microchip. But I did find something interesting." Tanya handed over a tablet showing a Department of Defense website. "I was Googling his behavior patterns, and I think he might be a military dog. Look at this image." The photo showed soldiers with German Shepherds in desert terrain. The dogs wore tactical vests, similar to their human counterparts. The limping, the unusual discipline, the way he responds to certain commands, it fits the profile. Tanya continued, "If he is a military dog, he was trained to protect people, not attack them." Sarah scrolled through the information. Her professional curiosity piqued. "Even if that's true, we need more than speculation to halt a euthanasia order after a documented attack on a child." "I know, but..." Tanya hesitated. "What if we got it wrong? What if there's more to the story?" The question lingered as Sarah made her afternoon rounds, settling like a weight in her stomach. She'd euthanized dangerous animals before. It was an unfortunate but necessary part of her job. Yet something about this case felt off, like a puzzle with missing pieces. When she reached Max's kennel, the dog stood at attention, as if expecting her. On impulse, she tried an experiment. "Sitz," she commanded in German. Max immediately sat, eyes fixed on her face. "Platz." He lay down promptly. "Bleib." He remained perfectly still. Sarah felt her throat tighten. These weren't tricks a typical pet would know. They were military or police commands, evidence of specialized training. "What were you doing at that construction site?" "Max," she murmured. "And what really happened with that little girl across town?" Diane Matthews sat in her lawyer's office. The latest filing from Robert's attorney spread across the desk between them. The emergency custody motion cited the dog attack as evidence of a pattern of negligent supervision endangering the minor child's welfare. "He's pushing for an immediate temporary custody order," her lawyer explained, adjusting his glasses. "If granted, Lily would stay with him until a full hearing can be scheduled." Diane felt the room tilt slightly. "He can't take her. She barely knows him anymore. He's seen her maybe 6 times in the last year." "I understand, but we need to prepare for all possibilities. Judge Carlton is presiding, and he tends to be conservative in these matters." Diane's phone chimed with a text from Ms. Bryant. "Need to speak with you urgently about Lily's drawings. Please call when possible." A knock at the office door interrupted before Diane could respond. The receptionist poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's an elderly gentleman insisting on speaking with Ms. Matthews. Says it's about her daughter and the dog incident. Mr. Thompson." Diane frowned. "I don't know any Mr. Thompson." Her lawyer sighed. "Probably a witness Robert's team found." "You might as well hear what he has to say." Frank Thompson entered the office with the careful dignity of a man who'd spent his life on construction sites rather than in professional buildings. His weathered hands clutched a battered trucker's cap, and his expression carried an urgency that gave Diane pause. "Ms. Matthews, I'm Frank Thompson. I worked at the construction site by Jefferson Park. I saw what happened yesterday with your little girl and that German shepherd." Diane stiffened. "If my ex-husband sent you—" "Nobody sent me, ma'am. I'm here because that dog is going to die for something he didn't do. He wasn't attacking your daughter, he was saving her life." The absolute conviction in his voice silenced Diane's initial skepticism. "The crane that collapsed your little girl was standing right where it fell, not 10 seconds before it came down. That dog knocked her clear of the danger zone." Diane exchanged glances with her lawyer. That's impossible. How could a stray dog possibly know a crane was going to fall? Military dogs are trained to detect structural instabilities, vibrations, sounds humans can't hear. I served with K9 units in Vietnam. That dog's got training, special training. Before Diane could respond, her phone rang. Ms. Bryant calling. She answered, listening intently as the teacher explained about Lily's drawings. "She's been trying to tell us the same thing all day," Ms. Bryant concluded. "The dog wasn't attacking her, it was pushing her away from something falling." Diane felt the blood drain from her face as the pieces aligned Frank Thompson's account. Lily's drawings. The torn jacket that looked more like a pull than an attack. "Oh my God," she whispered. "We're going to execute the dog that saved my daughter's life." Her lawyer, who had been listening with increasing interest, leaned forward. "If this is true, Ms. Matthews, it completely undermines Robert's emergency custody motion. But more importantly, an innocent animal is going to die." Diane interrupted, already gathering her things. "Mr. Thompson, we need to get to that shelter, now." As they rushed out, Frank added one final, chilling detail. "There's something else you should know. That crane didn't just fail. My contact at the site says someone deliberately cut partway through those cables. Could have killed dozens if it had fallen during working hours." Diane stopped short. "Are you saying someone intentionally damaged the crane?" Frank nodded grimly. "And if that's true, your little girl might have been the only witness, even if she didn't understand what she saw. And that dog might be the only reason she's still alive." The implication settled over them like a shadow. The attack on a child that wasn't an attack. The heroic dog facing death. And the darker possibility that someone had orchestrated a deadly accident that nearly claimed a child's life. "Friday morning?" Diane murmured. "That's when they're scheduled to euthanize him," Frank finished. "We've got less than 48 hours to save that dog's life and maybe figure out who tried to kill your daughter." Thursday morning dawned with leaden skies over Oak Ridge, the threat of rain hanging in the air like an unspoken promise. Dr. Sarah Peters arrived at the shelter earlier than usual. The weight of tomorrow's scheduled euthanasia sitting uncomfortably in her chest. She'd tossed and turned all night. Dreams filled with falling cranes and amber-eyed dogs trying to speak to her in a language she couldn't understand. Her first stop was Max's kennel. The German shepherd stood at attention when she approached, his posture military straight despite the slight favoring of his right hind leg. "Morning, soldier," she said softly, unlatching the door to enter his space, something shelter protocol advised against with potentially dangerous animals. But Sarah's 20 years of veterinary experience had taught her to trust her instincts about animals, and everything about Max contradicted the aggressive label in his file. Max made no move toward her, maintaining a respectful distance until she extended her hand. Only then did he step forward to sniff her fingers, his tail offering a tentative wag. "You're no killer," she murmured, running her hand along his thick coat. So what really happened at that construction site? Her examination confirmed what she'd suspected. The scarring on his hindquarters and the distinctive pattern of healed wounds were consistent with battlefield injuries. This was no ordinary stray. This was a veteran. Like the young men who sometimes came to her brother's PTSD support group with thousand-yard stares and jumpy reflexes. "Dr. Peters," Tanya's voice interrupted her thoughts. "There's someone here about the German Shepherd. Actually, several someones." Sarah found 4 people waiting in the shelter's modest reception area, a haggard-looking woman in nurse's scrubs, a small blonde girl clutching a stack of drawings, an elderly man with the weathered complexion of someone who'd spent decades working outdoors, and a balding man in a rumpled suit who introduced himself as a lawyer. "I'm Diane Matthews," the woman said, stepping forward. "This is my daughter Lily, that German Shepherd you have scheduled for euthanasia tomorrow. He didn't attack my daughter. He saved her life." 30 minutes and several crayon drawings later, Sarah sat back in her office chair, processing the extraordinary story they'd shared. "Let me make sure I understand correctly. You believe Max, that's what Mr. Thompson calls him, sensed the crane was about to collapse and deliberately pushed Lily out of danger?" Frank Thompson nodded emphatically. "I saw it with my own eyes from the site trailer. Wasn't close enough to do anything myself, but that dog knew exactly what he was doing." Lily, who had remained silent throughout the adults' discussion, suddenly spoke. "Hero dog," she said clearly, pointing to her most detailed drawing, the one showing the German Shepherd pushing her away from the falling crane. Dr. Peters studied the child. "Lily, were you scared of the dog?" Lily nodded, then shook her head, her expression conflicted. "She was scared in the moment," Diane explained. "Any child would be, with a large dog charging at them. But she wasn't hurt, just frightened and confused." Sarah turned to her computer, pulling up Max's intake file. "The report indicates torn clothing, consistent with an attack." "He was pulling her by the jacket," Frank interjected. "Military dogs are trained to extract civilians from danger zones. He wasn't trying to bite her, he was saving her." The lawyer cleared his throat. "There's another concerning element to all this. Mr. Thompson has reason to believe the crane collapse wasn't accidental. If that's true, Lily may have witnessed someone tampering with the equipment, making her a potential target." Sarah felt a chill at the implication. "That's a matter for the police, surely." "We've contacted them," Diane said. "But right now, our immediate concern is stopping tomorrow's euthanasia. That dog is a hero, not a threat." Sarah glanced at the clock. 9:17 a.m., less than 24 hours until the scheduled procedure. "I understand your concerns, but I can't simply cancel a euthanasia order without proper documentation. There are protocols. My daughter is alive because of that dog." Diane interrupted, her voice breaking. "Please, there must be something you can do." Before Sarah could respond, her office phone rang. The shelter's front desk rarely forwarded calls to her office unless it was urgent. "Excuse me," she said, lifting the receiver. "Dr. Peters speaking." "Peters." The voice on the other end belonged to Billy Watson, the construction site security guard. "Ma'am, I'm calling about that German Shepherd you've got there. The one they're saying attacked a kid. I've got security footage you need to see." Sarah's pulse quickened. You have video of the incident. Yes, ma'am. My cousin in IT recovered it from the backup servers. Shows the whole thing, the dog, the little girl, the crane coming down. Clear as day what really happened. Sarah looked at the expectant faces watching her. Mr. Watson? How quickly can you get that footage to the shelter? That's the thing. Ma'am, company's got the place locked down tight since we found evidence of tampering. They're saying it's an active investigation, restricting access to all digital files. I can't send it, and I'm not supposed to leave my post. Frank leaned forward, his expression urgent. That's Colton Construction covering their tracks. They knew those supports were compromised. Sarah made a split-second decision. Mr. Watson, we'll come to you. Text this number with the exact location. She scribbled the shelter's mobile number on a notepad and slid it toward the phone. As she hung up, Tanya appeared in the doorway, her expression grave. Dr. Peters, Mr. Hargrove from Animal Control is here for the pre-euthanasia paperwork. Says he needs your signature today since you'll be in surgery tomorrow morning when they come for the dog. The timing couldn't have been worse. Sarah glanced at the Matthews family, then back at her assistant. Tell him I'm with clients. I'll be out in 15 minutes. After Tanya left, Sarah lowered her voice. Listen carefully. I can delay the paperwork today, but by tomorrow morning, I'll have no legal grounds to prevent the euthanasia without concrete evidence clearing Max. The security footage, Frank began, may not be accessible if what Mr. Watson says is true. Sarah finished. We need a backup plan. Diane's lawyer spoke up. What about a temporary injunction? I could file an emergency motion this afternoon. On what grounds? Sarah asked. New evidence suggesting the dog was protecting, not attacking. It's thin, but it might buy us 24 hours. Sarah nodded. Do it. Meanwhile, Mr. Thompson and I will go to the construction site to see that footage. Mrs. Matthews, you and Lily should go to the police station. If someone deliberately sabotaged that crane, your daughter could still be in danger. As they formulated their plan, none of them noticed the shelter's front door opening or the man in a Colton construction jacket who stood just within earshot, his expression darkening as he listened. An hour later, Sarah's aging Subaru bounced along the access road to the construction site. Frank Thompson riding shotgun. The elderly construction worker directed her toward the security office, a glorified shed at the edge of the property. Something ain't right, Frank muttered as they approached. Where's Billy? His truck should be here. The security office door stood slightly ajar. Sarah felt a prickle of unease as they approached. Mr. Watson, she called. It's Dr. Peters from the animal shelter. No response. Frank pushed the door open wider, revealing an empty office. The security monitors displayed static. A half-finished cup of coffee sat on the desk, still warm. He was just here, Frank said. Called you less than an hour ago. Sarah spotted a cell phone on the floor near the desk screen cracked, as if dropped in haste. I don't like this, she murmured, backing toward the door. We should call the police. A vehicle engine roared to life nearby. Through the office window, Sarah glimpsed a black SUV peeling away from the rear of the building, tires spitting gravel. That's Jeffrey's site manager, Frank said, his voice tight. And I'd bet my pension Billy's not far from here, in a world of trouble. Sarah's phone rang. Diane Matthews calling. Dr. Peters, the police are taking this seriously. That crane was definitely tampered with. They're sending officers to the construction site now. Tell them to hurry, Sarah replied, scanning the surroundings with growing apprehension. The security guard who has the footage is missing, and we just saw the site manager leaving in a hurry. There's more, Diane continued, her voice dropping. The detective says there have been 3 other accidents at Colton construction sites in the past year. They suspect insurance fraud, deliberately creating incidents for the payouts. The implications were chilling. If someone had orchestrated the crane collapse as part of an insurance scheme, they wouldn't want witnesses, human or canine. We need to get back to the shelter, Sarah said suddenly. If they're trying to eliminate evidence, the dog, Frank finished, already moving toward the car. He's the only witness they can easily get rid of. Sarah's hands shook as she started the engine. Max was scheduled for euthanasia tomorrow. But what if someone decided to accelerate the timeline? Animal shelters weren't high-security facilities. Call Tanya, Frank urged. Tell her not to let anyone near that dog. Sarah dialed, the phone ringing several times before going to voicemail. She's not answering. She tried the shelter's main line with the same result. Something's wrong. The shelter never goes unanswered during business hours. She pressed the accelerator, the Subaru's engine protesting as they sped back toward town. Every traffic light seemed determined to delay them. Every slow-moving vehicle an insurmountable obstacle. Sarah found herself praying to God, to fate, to whatever forces might be listening that they would reach Max in time. At the police station, Detective Rivera was showing Diane and Lily photographs of Colton construction employees. Take your time, he advised Lily gently. Just point if you see someone who was near the crane before it fell. Lily studied the images with unusual focus, her finger hovering uncertainly until it landed on a man with a thin face and cold eyes. Bad man, she said quietly, hitting metal. The detective nodded. That's Edward Jeffries, the site manager. You're sure you saw him near the crane? Lily nodded emphatically. Diane's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Shelter not answering. Security guard missing. Heading there now. Meet us ASAP. A sense of dread washed over her. Detective, I think the people who sabotaged the crane might be trying to eliminate evidence, including the dog that saved Lily. Rivera was already reaching for his radio. Johnson, get a unit to the animal shelter on Oak Street. Possible connection to the Colton case. Back at the shelter, Sarah screeched into the parking lot, noticing immediately that something was wrong. The open sign had been turned to closed midday, and Tanya's car remained in its usual spot. But there was also a dark van with tinted windows parked near the rear entrance. That ain't animal control, Frank observed grimly. Their vehicles have county markings. Sarah reached into her glove compartment and removed a small canister of pepper spray protection for late-night emergency calls in remote areas. Stay here and call 911, she instructed Frank. Tell them exactly what's happening. Like hell I will, the old man retorted, pulling a heavy flashlight from beneath the seat. I was fighting for what's right before you were born, young lady. They approached the shelter cautiously. Through the front windows, Sarah could see the reception area was empty. Chairs overturned as if there had been a struggle. The normally busy shelter was eerily silent. Side entrance, she whispered to Frank. My office connects to the kennel area. They crept around the building, Sarah's heart pounding so loudly she was certain it would give them away. Her key turned silently in the lock, and they slipped inside her darkened office. Voices drifted from the kennel area, male voices speaking in urgent, hushed tones. "Just do it already," one said. "The regular stuff's locked up, but this'll work just as well. Double the dose. I ain't a vet, man. What if someone checks the body? By the time anyone does an autopsy on a shelter mutt, we'll be 3 states away. Jeffries is handling the security footage. This is the last loose end." Sarah felt cold fury replace her fear. They were going to kill Max, the dog who had saved a child's life, who had served his country, who had done nothing but act on his training and instinct. She caught Frank's eye and mouthed, "On 3. 1. She gripped the pepper spray. 2. Frank raised the heavy flashlight. 3. They burst through the door into the kennel area to find 2 men in Colton construction jackets. One held a syringe filled with cloudy liquid. The other was attempting to loop a catch pole around Max's neck through the kennel bars. The German shepherd was backed into the corner of his kennel, hackles raised, a low growl emanating from his throat. "Stop right there," Sarah commanded, her voice carrying an authority that surprised even her. The men spun around, startled by the interruption. The one with the syringe recovered first, lunging toward her with unexpected speed. Frank Thompson might have been pushing 70, but decades on construction sites had kept him strong. He swung the flashlight with practiced precision, connecting with the attacker's outstretched arm. The syringe clattered to the floor, its contents splashing harmlessly against the concrete. The second man abandoned the catch pole and charged at Frank, who stumbled backward under the assault. Sarah aimed her pepper spray, but hesitated. Frank and the attacker were too entangled, and she risked hitting them both. A blur of black and tan fur shot past her legs Max, somehow free from his kennel, launching himself at Frank's attacker with military precision. His teeth closed around the man's forearm, not with the crushing force he was capable of, but with enough pressure to elicit a scream of pain and surprise. "Police! Nobody move!" Detective Rivera's voice boomed from the doorway, his service weapon drawn. 2 uniformed officers flanked him, their own weapons at the ready. In the chaotic seconds that followed, Sarah found herself on her knees beside Max, who had released his hold at the sound of the police and returned to her side. His warm body pressed against her legs, protective rather than threatening. "Good boy," she whispered, tears blurring her vision as she buried her fingers in his thick fur. "You really are a hero, aren't you?" From somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed more police, perhaps an ambulance. The immediate danger had passed, but the most important question remained unanswered. Had they acted in time to save Max from his scheduled execution, or had the paperwork already been processed? The decision already made by those who hadn't witnessed his remarkable courage, Sarah looked up to see Diane and Lily being escorted into the kennel area by another officer. The little girl broke free from her mother's grasp and ran straight toward them. "Lily, wait!" Diane called, fear flashing across her face. But Max made no aggressive move as the child approached. Instead, he sat perfectly still, his intelligent eyes fixed on the girl he had saved. "Hero dog," Lily said again, wrapping her small arms around Max's neck. And in that embrace, Sarah saw the truth that no paperwork could possibly capture the unbreakable bond between a child and the dog who had risked everything to protect her. The fluorescent lights of the Oak Ridge police station buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow across the worn furniture of the interview room. Diane Matthews sat with her hands wrapped around a paper cup of cooling coffee. Exhaustion etched into every line of her face. Across the table, Detective Rivera closed a manila folder, and offered a grim smile. "Mrs. Matthews, I want to thank you and your daughter for your cooperation. Your testimony, along with Mr. Thompson's statement and Dr. Peters's evidence, has given us enough to pursue charges against Edward Jeffries and his accomplices." Diane nodded, too drained to feel any satisfaction. The last 6 hours had been a blur of statements, forms, and tense phone calls. Lily had finally fallen asleep on a cot in the station's break room, her small body curled protectively around her backpack full of drawings. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice rough from recounting the story multiple times. "Jeffries and his men will be arraigned tomorrow on multiple charges: attempted murder, fraud, criminal conspiracy, destruction of property, and animal cruelty." Rivera's expression hardened. "We've been building a case against Colton Construction for months. They've been orchestrating accidents at their sites for insurance payouts. This crane collapse would have been their biggest score yet, and they were willing to kill my daughter for it." The words felt strange in Diane's mouth, too monstrous to be real. "They didn't expect witnesses," Rivera confirmed. "When your daughter wandered into the construction zone, she unknowingly put herself in danger twice over from both the falling crane and from whoever was tampering with it. If it hadn't been for Max—" Diane couldn't finish the sentence, her throat constricting around the terrible possibility. The detective nodded solemnly. "That dog is something special. Military training or not, he made a choice that saved Lily's life, and we almost killed him for it." The weight of that injustice settled on Diane's shoulders like a physical burden. "What's happening with him now? Is he still scheduled for—" She couldn't bring herself to say the word. "That's actually why I called you back in." Rivera slid a new form across the table. "This is from Animal Control. They've officially rescinded the euthanasia order in light of new evidence. But there's still the matter of what happens to Max moving forward." Diane scanned the document, hope flickering for the first time in what felt like days. "He's not going to be put down." "No, but as a stray with no registered owner, he would normally go into the adoption system. Given his military background and the recent events, there are concerns about placing him with just any family." The implication hung in the air between them. Diane found herself thinking of Max's amber eyes, so intelligent and watchful, and of the gentle way he had sat beside Lily at the shelter after the police arrived. "What if—" she began, surprised by the certainty suddenly blooming within her. "What if we adopted him?" Rivera raised an eyebrow. "That's actually what Dr. Peters suggested might be best for the dog. But given what you've been through, no one wanted to pressure you." Diane stared at her hands, turning the idea over in her mind. A week ago, the thought of bringing a large German shepherd into their small home would have seemed impossible, especially one that had seemingly attacked her daughter. But now, the impossible had become the obvious. "I need to discuss it with Lily." "Of course. But yes, I think that's what we should do." The detective smiled, a genuine warmth replacing his professional demeanor. "For what it's worth, Mrs. Matthews, I think that dog belongs with your family. Some things are just meant to be." As Diane signed the preliminary forms indicating her interest in adoption, a text message lit up her phone. It was from her lawyer. Robert withdrew emergency custody motion. News about crane sabotage and dog saving. Lily hit local press. He's backing off completely. A small victory amidst the chaos, but significant nonetheless. The custody battle that had been consuming her life suddenly seemed distant and unimportant compared to what they'd just survived. Across town at the Oak Ridge Animal Shelter, Dr. Sarah Peters fought her own battle with exhaustion as she completed her examination of Max. The German Shepherd had sustained minor injuries during the confrontation with Jeffrey's men, a cut above his eye and bruised ribs, but his spirit remained unbroken. "You've had quite a day, haven't you?" "Soldier," she murmured, gently cleaning the wound. Max held perfectly still, his only movement the occasional soft thump of his tail against the examination table. Tanya appeared in the doorway, an ice pack held to her bruised cheek where one of the intruders had struck her. "Police just called. They've finished processing the kennel area. We can move Max back in whenever you're ready." Sarah hesitated, looking down at the dog who had shown such remarkable courage. The sterile kennel with its concrete floor and chain-link front seemed an insult to his dignity. "He's not going back there," she decided. "He'll stay in my office tonight." "Is that allowed?" Tanya asked, though her smile suggested she already knew the answer. "I'm making an executive decision." Sarah ran her hand along Max's back, feeling the ridge of old scars beneath his fur. After what he's been through, he deserves better than a kennel. As Tanya left to prepare the office, Sarah found herself overcome with emotion. In 20 years of veterinary practice, she'd learned to maintain professional distance. Animals came and went, some to happy homes, others to more tragic ends. But something about Max had broken through her carefully constructed barriers. Perhaps it was the echo of her son she saw in him, the same unflinching courage, the same willingness to put others before himself. Alex had died trying to save a coworker when a support beam collapsed at his construction site. The parallels were too sharp to ignore. "You know," she said to Max, who watched her with those intelligent eyes, "my son would have liked you. He always said you could judge a person's character by how they treat those who can't speak for themselves." She smiled sadly. "I think the same goes for dogs." Max tilted his head, then gently pressed his muzzle against her hand, a gesture so understanding that Sarah found tears spilling down her cheeks before she could stop them. "This is highly unprofessional," she informed him, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. "Don't tell the other animals." Max's tail thumped again, as if sharing in her small moment of humor. Later that night, with Max curled on a blanket beside her desk, Sarah completed the final paperwork, nullifying tomorrow's euthanasia order. Each signature felt like an act of justice, small atonements for the grave error that had nearly cost this remarkable animal his life. Her phone chimed with a text from Diane Matthews. "Lily and I would like to adopt Max. Is that possible?" Sarah smiled, glancing at the sleeping dog. "I think that's a perfect idea," she wrote back. "He saved her once. I believe he'd spend his life doing it again if needed." Frank Thompson sat alone on his porch, nursing a glass of bourbon and watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. His joints ached from the day's excitement, too old for heroics. His doctor would have scolded, but a profound satisfaction had settled in his chest, warming him more effectively than the alcohol. The police had found Billy Watson bound and gagged in a storage shed at the construction site, shaken but largely unharmed. The security footage had been recovered intact, providing irrefutable evidence of both the crane tampering and Max's heroic actions. "Told you that dog was special," he murmured to the night air, raising his glass in a solitary toast. His phone rang, his nephew calling from the county office. "Uncle Frank, you sitting down, the FBI just showed up at the main Colton construction office. Turns out this insurance fraud scheme goes way beyond Oak Ridge. They're saying it could be millions of dollars across 6 states. Frank nodded to himself, unsurprised. He'd spent enough decades in the industry to recognize the patterns of corruption. "Any word on what'll happen to the workers' site's going to be shut down for the investigation, I reckon. That's the other thing I wanted to tell you. County commissioner's already talking about bringing in Dawson Brothers to take over the project. They're going to need experienced foremen who know the site." "I'm retired," Frank reminded him, though the prospect of returning to work stirred something in his old bones. "Just saying. If you wanted to unretire, there'd be a position waiting. Word's gotten around about what you did today. People are calling you a hero." Frank snorted. "The dog's the hero. I just did what needed doing." After ending the call, he sat a while longer, contemplating the twist his life had taken. At 68, he'd thought his days of making a difference were behind him. Now, unexpectedly, he'd helped save 2 lives, a child's and a dog's, and perhaps even more if the investigation prevented future accidents. Not bad for an old man, he thought, raising his glass to the stars once more. In the Matthews household, Lily sat cross-legged on her bed, surrounded by her drawings. She'd added a new one, the German shepherd standing protectively beside a small blonde girl, both of them smiling. The crude lines conveyed a happiness that transcended artistic skill. "Hero dog," she said, showing the picture to her mother, who sat at the edge of the bed. "Yes. Sweetie, Max is definitely a hero." Diane stroked her daughter's hair. "How would you feel if Max came to live with us? Would that be okay?" Lily's eyes widened, her face lighting up with more animation than Diane had seen in months. "Forever, forever," Diane confirmed. "He'd be our dog, and we'd take care of him." "Yes." Lily bounced on the bed, then suddenly grew serious. "He saved me, Mommy, from the big crash." "I know, baby. And we almost did a terrible thing because we didn't understand." Diane swallowed hard. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, even when we're trying to protect the people we love." Lily considered this with the solemn contemplation unique to children. "Max forgives us," she finally declared with absolute certainty. Diane marveled at her daughter's simple wisdom. "I hope so, sweetie." "He does." Lily nodded decisively. "He's a good dog." As Diane tucked her daughter in for the night, she felt a profound shift in her understanding of protection. She'd spent years fighting to shield Lily from the world's dangers, from Robert's indifference, from the challenges of her autism, from everyday threats both real and imagined. Yet when genuine danger had come, it was a homeless dog with battle scars who had saved her child. Perhaps protection wasn't always what it seemed. Perhaps sometimes it came with teeth and claws, and the wisdom to know when to use them. "Good night, sweetheart," she whispered, kissing Lily's forehead. "Tomorrow we'll go see Max." "And bring him home," Lily added sleepily. "Yes," Diane promised. "We'll bring him home." As she turned out the light, Diane felt the weight of the day settling into her bones. They had come so close to tragedy, Lily nearly crushed by a falling crane, Max nearly executed for his heroism, justice nearly denied by corporate greed. Yet somehow Through a series of unlikely connections, disaster had been averted. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: adoption paperwork, police statements, media inquiries about the construction scandal. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of their small home, Diane allowed herself to feel something that had been absent for too long: hope. Fragile, but persistent, like the first green shoot after a long winter. Friday morning arrived with a gentle rain that washed Oak Ridge clean, as if nature itself were trying to rinse away the previous day's darkness. The Oak Ridge Gazette's front page declared in bold letters, "Local dog hero saves child from sabotaged crane," accompanied by a grainy still from the recovered security footage showing Max pushing Lily clear of danger moments before the collapse. By 9 o'clock, the hour originally scheduled for Max's euthanasia, the animal shelter's phone lines were jammed with calls from residents wanting to donate to Max's care or offer support. Local television vans clustered in the parking lot, reporters eager to capture this unexpected story of heroism and redemption. Inside her office, Dr. Sarah Peters carefully checked Max's injuries one final time before his transfer to the Matthews home. The cut above his eye was healing nicely, and his bruised ribs showed no signs of complication. More importantly, his spirit remained strong, his amber eyes alert and watchful, his demeanor calm despite the commotion beyond the office door. "You're quite the celebrity now," she told him, scratching behind his ears in the spot she'd discovered he favored. "Though I suspect you'd trade all the attention for a quiet corner and a good bone." Max leaned into her touch, a gesture that still surprised Sarah with its trust. This dog, who had every reason to fear humans after all he'd endured, continued to show remarkable forgiveness. A knock at the door preceded Tanya's entrance. "They're here," she announced. "And you might want to prepare yourself. There's quite a crowd out front." Sarah nodded, attaching a new leather leash to Max's collar donated that morning by the owner of the local pet shop, who had arrived in tears after reading the newspaper. "Ready for your new life, soldier?" Max stood, his posture straightening at her tone as if responding to a command. Together. They walked through the shelter's narrow hallway toward the reception area where Diane and Lily Matthews waited. The moment Max spotted Lily, his tail began to wag, not the enthusiastic flurry of an ordinary pet, but the measured, dignified acknowledgement of a guardian recognizing his charge. Lily, who had been clutching her mother's hand nervously, broke into a brilliant smile. "Max," she called, her voice carrying a joy that made several onlookers brush away tears. Dr. Peters handed the leash to Diane. "His wounds should heal completely within a week. I've included care instructions and some resources about former military dogs. They can have special needs, but they also offer extraordinary loyalty." Diane nodded, clearly overwhelmed by the moment. "I don't know how to thank you, all of you, for what you've done. Just love him," Sarah replied simply. "He's earned that much." As they prepared to leave, Frank Thompson appeared in the doorway, leaning on a cane, a concession to his aching knee after yesterday's exertions. "Thought I'd come to see the hero off to his new home," he explained, his weathered face creasing into a smile. Max approached the elderly man, his tail continuing its steady rhythm. Frank knelt with difficulty to meet the dog at eye level. "You done good, soldier," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Real good." The small procession moved toward the exit, where the gathered crowd and media waited. Diane hesitated, protective maternal instincts flaring at the thought of exposing Lily to such attention. But to everyone's surprise, it was Lily who squared her small shoulders and walked forward confidently, one hand on Max's fur. "Hero dog," she announced to the assembled reporters, her voice clearer and stronger than Diane had heard in years. The crowd parted, cameras flashing, but reporters maintaining a respectful distance as the Matthews family and their new guardian made their way to Diane's modest sedan. Max jumped into the back seat beside Lily with fluid grace, settling beside her as if he'd been doing it all his life. As they drove away, Sarah Peters stood with Frank Thompson on the shelter steps, watching the beginning of a new chapter for all involved. "You reckon they'll be all right?" Frank asked. Sarah smiled, thinking of the fierce protectiveness she'd witnessed in Max, the emerging confidence in Lily, and the determined resilience in Diane. "I think they're going to be just fine." At the police station across town, Detective Rivera sat across from Edward Jeffries, who had traded his construction manager's attire for an orange jumpsuit. The man's arrogance had dissolved during the night in detention, replaced by the desperate calculation of someone seeing their future crumbling before them. "We've got you dead to rights on the crane sabotage," Rivera said, sliding photographs across the table. "Security footage, physical evidence, testimony from your accomplices who are falling over themselves to cut deals." Jeffrey stared at the images, his face ashen. "I want immunity." Rivera leaned back, contempt evident in his posture. "You orchestrated an insurance scheme that nearly killed a child. Immunity isn't on the table." "You don't understand. It goes higher, way higher. I was following orders." Jeffries leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Colton himself is behind it all, has been for years. I can prove it." The detective's expression remained impassive, though his interest sharpened. Martin Colton was one of the wealthiest developers in the state, his political connections extending to the governor's mansion. "We're listening. I want protection and a reduced sentence. Written guarantee. Start talking, and we'll see what the DA can do." Jeffries glanced nervously at the two-way mirror. "Colton's been orchestrating accidents at sites for over a decade, insurance payouts, construction delays that let him manipulate stock prices, eliminating competitors by sabotaging their projects and making it look like incompetence. And the Oak Ridge site. Biggest score yet. The insurance policy had a specific clause about catastrophic equipment failure that would have paid triple. Plus, the delay would have forced the town to renegotiate terms, giving Colton leverage to acquire additional land at a fraction of the value." Rivera pushed a legal pad across the table. "Write it all down. Names, dates, amounts, everything." As Jeffries began his confession, Rivera stepped outside to where the district attorney waited. "We've got him," he said quietly, "and he's about to give us Martin Colton." The DA's eyebrows rose. "Colton has friends in the State House. This will make waves." "Good," Rivera replied. "Some waves need making." Back at the Matthews home, Diane watched through the kitchen window as Lily showed Max around the small backyard. The girl chattered more freely than she had in months, pointing out her swing set, the bird feeder, the flower bed she'd helped plant last spring. Max followed attentively, his ears perked forward as if understanding every word. The normalcy of the scene brought a lump to Diane's throat. 24 hours ago, she'd been preparing for a custody battle, believing her daughter had been attacked by a vicious stray. Now, That same vicious stray was being shown the best places to dig in the garden by a little girl who couldn't stop smiling. Her phone rang her lawyer, calling with updates. "The court has officially dismissed Robert's emergency petition," he reported. Judge was not impressed when he learned Robert tried to use the incident for leverage, especially given what we now know about the dog and the crane sabotage. Relief washed over Diane. "So the custody arrangement stays as is." "Better. Actually, Robert's attorney indicated he may be willing to reduce his visitation schedule. Apparently, the publicity around this case has made him uncomfortable with the spotlight." After ending the call, Diane joined Lily and Max in the backyard. Her daughter was demonstrating how the sprinkler system worked, pointing to the various heads embedded in the lawn. Max sat at perfect attention, his posture military straight but his eyes gentle. "Lunch is ready whenever you two explorers are," Diane announced. Lily looked up, her face flushed with excitement. "Can Max eat with us?" "At the table." Diane pretended to consider this serious breach of household policy. "Well, since it's his first day, maybe we can make an exception. Just this once." "Every day," Lily countered with unexpected boldness. "He's family now." The simple declaration, "he's family now," settled over Diane with surprising weight. Family. Yes, that felt right. This dog who had saved her daughter's life, who had nearly lost his own due to their misunderstanding, was now irrevocably part of their small unit. "Every day it is," she agreed. Inside, as they settled around the kitchen table with sandwiches and, for Max, a bowl of the premium dog food Dr. Peters had recommended. The doorbell rang. Diane opened the front door to find a delivery person holding an enormous basket overflowing with dog toys, treats, and supplies. "Delivery for Max," the young man announced, consulting his clipboard. "From the Oak Ridge Veterans Association." Before Diane could respond, a car pulled up to the curb, and an elderly couple emerged carrying a plush dog bed. "We saw the story in the paper," the woman called. "Our grandson is a canine handler in the Army. We wanted to contribute something." Throughout the afternoon, a steady stream of visitors arrived, neighbors with offerings for Max, local veterans paying respects to a fellow service member, children bringing hand-drawn cards declaring Max a hero. The small front porch accumulated gifts faster than Diane could bring them inside. Max accepted the attention with stoic grace, allowing children to pet him under Diane's watchful eye, sitting patiently for photographs, accepting treats with gentle courtesy. But his attention never strayed far from Lily, his amber gaze finding her regularly as if confirming her safety. As evening approached and the visitors finally dwindled, Diane sat on the porch swing with a cup of tea, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and purple. Max lay at her feet, his large frame settled comfortably on the welcome mat as if he'd always belonged there. The day's events had transformed more than just their household. The local news was reporting that Martin Colton himself had been taken in for questioning based on Edward Jeffrey's testimony. The construction site remained closed, but rumors suggested Dawson Brothers would take over the project, with Frank Thompson returning from retirement to oversee safety compliance. Most remarkably, Dr. Peters had announced the creation of the Max Fund, a shelter program specifically for identifying and rehabilitating former service dogs who ended up as strays. The community had already donated enough to support the initiative for its first year. From near tragedy had come unexpected blessings, connections forged in the crucible of crisis that might never have existed otherwise. Lily emerged from the house in her pajamas. Clutching a new drawing, she settled beside her mother on the swing, extending the paper for inspection. The picture showed their house with 3 figures in front: Lily, Diane, and Max standing protectively beside them. "Our family," Lily said simply. Diane wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders, her other hand dropping to stroke Max's fur. "Yes, sweetheart, our family." Max looked up at them, his intelligent eyes reflecting the last golden light of day. Then he sighed deeply, a sound of contentment, and laid his head on his paws. Finally, at home. 3 months later, Jefferson Park reopened to the public with a ribbon-cutting ceremony that drew most of Oak Ridge's residents. The abandoned construction project had been transformed into an expanded green space with new playground equipment, walking paths, and, at the community's insistence, a special dog park area named Max's Corner. Autumn painted the trees in brilliant shades of red and gold as families gathered to celebrate. Children raced toward the gleaming slides and swings while parents chatted in clusters. The earlier tragedy now transformed into a story of community triumph over corporate greed. Diane Matthews stood at the edge of the gathering, watching Lily introduce Max to a group of admiring classmates. The German Shepherd sat regally, accepting their attention with dignified patience, his amber eyes never straying far from his young charge. The change in both of them over the past months had been remarkable, Lily speaking more confidently, engaging with other children, while Max had settled into family life with a contentment that sometimes brought tears to Diane's eyes. "Quite a turnout," observed Frank Thompson, appearing at her side. The elderly construction worker leaned less heavily on his cane these days. His new position as safety consultant for Dawson Brothers had given him renewed purpose, and his weathered face carried fewer worry lines. The whole town wanted to be part of it, Diane agreed. After everything that happened, I think people needed this a reminder that sometimes things work out right. Speaking of things working out, Frank nodded toward the parking lot, where Dr. Sarah Peters was helping a young man unload equipment from her Subaru. "Doc's new program's doing mighty fine work." The Max Fund had already rescued 3 former military dogs from high-kill shelters across the state. With the help of local veterans, Sarah had developed a rehabilitation program that prepared the animals for placement with families who understood their special needs. Today, she'd brought the program's newest success story, a Belgian Malinois named Scout, who would be going home with a retired Army sergeant. "She found her calling," Diane said softly. "We all did. In a way." The crowd quieted as Mayor Wilson approached the ceremonial ribbon stretched across the park entrance. The politician, never one to miss a photo opportunity, had arrived in a crisp blue suit despite the casual nature of the event. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying across the gathered families, "today we reclaim this space for the community of Oak Ridge. What was nearly a monument to corporate greed has become a testament to this town's resilience and character." Polite applause followed, though many exchanged knowing glances. The mayor had been among Martin Colton's most vocal supporters before the scandal broke. "And now, I'd like to invite our special guests of honor to help cut the ribbon." He gestured toward Lily and Max. This young lady and her extraordinary dog reminded us all that heroism comes in many forms. Lily approached the ribbon without hesitation, a confidence in her step that had been absent before. Max walked beside her, his posture alert but relaxed. When they reached the mayor, Lily accepted the ceremonial scissors with a shy smile. "Max helped too," she said clearly into the microphone, causing a ripple of affectionate laughter among the crowd. "Indeed he did," the mayor agreed. "Perhaps he'd like to assist with the ribbon cutting." Lily nodded and knelt beside Max, positioning the scissors. "Together," she told him, guiding his paw to the handle alongside her hand. The crowd erupted in applause as ribbon fluttered to the ground. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment for the next day's papers. But for those closest to the events that had brought them to this day, the real story wasn't in the public ceremony but in the quiet transformations that had occurred in its wake. Detective Rivera stood at the back of the crowd, watching with professional detachment but personal satisfaction. The Colton construction case had grown into the largest corporate fraud prosecution in state history. 8 executives now faced federal charges, and Martin Colton himself remained in custody, denied bail as a flight risk. What had begun with a sabotaged crane and a heroic dog had unraveled years of criminal activity. As the ceremony concluded and families spread throughout the park, Diane found herself sitting on a bench beside Sarah Peters, watching Lily and Max explore the new walking trail with Frank. "I never properly thanked you," Diane said, "for believing us about Max when you had every reason not to." Sarah smiled, her gaze following the German shepherd's attentive movements around Lily. "I just followed the evidence. Max did the real work. Still, if you hadn't delayed the paperwork that day—" Diane couldn't finish the sentence, the alternative still too painful to articulate. "Life gives us these moments sometimes," Sarah replied thoughtfully. "Crossroads where everything can change based on a single decision. I'm just grateful I made the right one." They sat in companionable silence. 2 women whose lives had intersected through crisis and emerged in unexpected friendship. Around them, the park hummed with the sounds of children's laughter, parents' conversations, and the occasional bark from the dog park. "He's changed her," Diane observed, watching Lily point out a squirrel to Max, who sat attentively at her command. "Her therapist says she's made more progress in 3 months than in the previous 2 years." Sarah nodded. "There's something healing about the uncomplicated love of a dog. They don't judge, don't hold grudges, don't see our differences as deficiencies. Just acceptance," Diane agreed. "Pure acceptance." As afternoon mellowed toward evening, families gradually dispersed, heading home for dinner or other weekend activities. Diane gathered their belongings while Lily and Max made one final circuit of the new playground. Frank Thompson approached, his expression contemplative. "You know, I've been thinking about that day, how everything had to line up just so. If Max hadn't been there, if I hadn't seen what happened, if you hadn't believed us—" He shook his head. "Some might call it luck, but I reckon it was something more." "Providence," Sarah suggested. "Maybe so," the old man agreed. "All I know is, in all my years, I ain't seen many endings as right as this one." As they walked toward the parking lot, Max trotted ahead with Lily, his posture relaxed but vigilant, always the protector, even in moments of peace. "It's not really an ending, though, is it?" Diane said, watching her daughter and the dog who had saved her. More like a beginning. The setting sun cast long shadows across Jefferson Park as they departed, painting the world in gentle amber hues that matched Max's watchful eyes. In the distance, the town of Oak Ridge prepared for evening, its skyline modest but somehow more dignified than before. A community that had faced darkness and emerged stronger, bound together by the unlikely heroism of a dog who had nearly been silenced forever. A beginning, Frank agreed, glancing back at the park's new sign where Max's Corner gleamed in fresh paint. And a mighty fine one at that. As Max jumped into the back seat of Diane's car, settling beside Lily with practiced ease, his gaze met Diane's in the rearview mirror. In that moment of connection, she felt a wordless understanding pass between them, a shared commitment to the small, precious family they had formed together. Some stories ended in tragedy, but this one, against all odds, had found its way to grace. Folks, this story of Max touches something deep in our hearts because it reminds us of truths we've learned over our decades of living. How many times have we misjudged someone based on appearances, only to discover we were completely wrong? How often have our most painful moments unexpectedly led to our greatest blessings? We've all stood where Diane stood, facing impossible decisions, fighting battles alone, and sometimes getting it wrong despite our best intentions. We know what it means to need a second